down to her last $400, and facing eviction with her 7-year-old daughter, Sarah Mitchell made a desperate decision to buy a foreclosed farm at a county auction that local residents actively avoided. What she discovered hidden in a sealed route. Cellar would not only change her life forever, but would uncover historical evidence that had been deliberately buried for over a century. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Mitchell stared at her bank account balance on her phone screen. $1,127.36. Just 18 months ago, she had been the head curator at the Westbrook Municipal Museum with a comfortable salary, a modest but well-maintained apartment, and enough savings to start a college fund for her daughter Lily. Now at 34, she was living in a month-to-month rental that she could no longer afford, serving coffee at the local diner and counting every dollar while trying to hide her mounting panic from her daughter. The museum's funding cuts had hit the entire staff hard, but Sarah had been particularly devastated when her position was eliminated completely. The specialized nature of her historical expertise made finding comparable work nearly impossible in the small city of Westbrook, and the competitive museum world had no openings within commuting distance. Her ex-husband's sporadic child support payments had dwindled to nothing 6 months ago when he moved overseas temporarily for work. "You can always move back home, sweetheart," her mother had suggested during their weekly phone call. "Your old room is still available, and Lily would love being close to her grandparents." But pride and a fierce determination to maintain stability for Lily kept Sarah from accepting that lifeline. She had built her independence carefully after her divorce 3 years ago, and the thought of retreating to her childhood bedroom felt like the ultimate failure. She was determined to find her own solution, to show Lily that setbacks were temporary and that resilience mattered more than circumstance. As she sat at their small kitchen table reviewing the final eviction notice, they had exactly 14 days to vacate. Sarah scrolled absently through the local news app on her phone. A small advertisement caught her eye. County foreclosure auction. Properties starting at $1,000. Most of the listings were for rundown houses with starting bids, well beyond her means, but one property description made her pause. A foreclosed farm on the outskirts of Mapleton County, about 40 minutes from Westbrook. The minimum bid was listed at $1,200, with the notation, "As is, significant repairs needed, no inspection available." Sarah had grown up in rural Pennsylvania, surrounded by farms and open spaces, before her academic pursuits led her to cities and universities. She had always promised herself that someday she would give Lily the same childhood experiences, room to explore, connection to the land, the lessons that came from growing things and caring for a place. But that had been a someday dream, not a desperate last resort. She clicked on the listing photos and frowned. The farmhouse was clearly in disrepair, peeling paint, a sagging porch, and overgrown fields stretching beyond. The listing mentioned no functioning plumbing, outdated, electrical wiring, possible structural issues. The auction was scheduled for tomorrow morning. "What are you looking at, Mom?" Lily asked, peering over Sarah's shoulder, her dark curls falling forward. Sarah almost closed the browser, not wanting to share her desperate considerations with her daughter, but something in Lily's curious expression stopped her. "It's a farm," she said honestly, "a very old, very broken farm that's being sold tomorrow." Lily's eyes widened. "Like in Charlotte's Web, with animals and a barn and everything?" "Well, there aren't any animals now," Sarah explained. "Someone lost the farm to the bank, and now it's being sold again. It needs a lot of work." "Could we buy it?" Lily asked, with the straightforward logic of a 7-year-old. You always said you wanted to live on a farm someday. Sarah started to explain all the reasons why they couldn't. The repairs, the distance from town, the impracticality of it all, but stopped herself. What were their alternatives? Another overpriced rental that would drain what little remained. Of her savings, moving back to her parents' house and admitting defeat. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Sarah researched everything she could about the property. It was known locally as the Emerson Farm, named after the family that had owned it from the 1860s until the 1970s. For the past 15 years, it had belonged to a reclusive history professor named Eleanor Winters, who had died without heirs the previous year. The property taxes had gone unpaid, and the county had foreclosed. The more Sarah read, the more her professional curiosity was piqued. Eleanor Winters had been a controversial figure in academic circles, brilliant but eccentric, known for her unconventional theories about local history that challenged established narratives. She had retired from teaching to focus on independent research, much of which remained unpublished at her death. By morning, Sarah had made her decision. It was risky, possibly foolish, but it also felt like the only path forward that didn't involve retreat. She withdrew $400 from her account, nearly everything she had, and drove to the county courthouse. Lily buckled into the back seat with a backpack full of books and snacks. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Are we really going to buy a farm today?" Lily asked, her voice caught between excitement and uncertainty. "We're going to try," Sarah answered honestly. "But it's a long shot, sweetheart. Other people might want it too." At the courthouse, Sarah registered as a bidder and received a numbered paddle. Lily sat beside her in the back row of the auction room, unusually quiet as she sensed the importance of the moment. The auctioneer worked through several properties before reaching the Emerson Farm. When the listing appeared on the projection screen, Sarah felt her heart race. This was it, their one desperate chance. Next we have the Emerson property, 47 acres with farmhouse and outbuildings, significant repairs needed, property sold as is, opening bid at $1,200. Do I hear $1,200? Sarah raised her paddle, her hand trembling slightly. The auctioneer nodded. $1,200 from bidder 43. Do I hear 2,300? The room remained silent. Sarah scanned the faces around her, expecting competition, but found only disinterest or even faint expressions of pity. Going once for $1,200. From the corner of her eye, Sarah noticed an older man in a tailored suit studying her with unusual intensity. For a moment she thought he might bid, but he remained still. Going twice for $1,200. Lily squeezed her hand, not fully understanding what was happening, but sensing its significance. Sold to bidder 43 for $1,200. A wave of emotions crashed over Sarah. Relief, terror, disbelief. She had just spent nearly every dollar she had on a dilapidated property she'd never even visited. As she completed the paperwork and handed over the cashier's check, the clerk gave her a curious look. "The Emerson place, huh?" The woman lowered her voice. "You should know there's a reason nobody wanted that property." "Because of the condition?" Sarah asked. The clerk shook her head. "That's part of it, sure. But that place has history. Bad history. Old Dr. Winters spent 15 years there, hardly leaving. They say she was obsessed with whatever happened there during the Civil War." The clerk leaned closer. "Some folks say it's not just the house that's disturbed." Sarah's academic mind immediately began cataloging the layers of superstition and local law that often attach themselves to historic properties. As a historian, she found such folklore fascinating rather than frightening. "I don't believe in curses," she said with a small smile. "Just opportunities for research. The clerk shrugged. Your funeral. Keys are in the envelope along with the property maps and deed. As they drove the 40 minutes to their new property, Lily's excitement grew. Will we sleep there tonight, Mom? Like camping? The thought hadn't occurred to Sarah. Their apartment still had 2 weeks before the eviction date, but they were paying by the day for a moving truck they hadn't yet used. Financially, it would make sense to move immediately, even into a house, without functioning utilities. Maybe, she hedged, we'll need to see what condition it's in first. When they turned onto the long gravel driveway, reality struck hard. The farmhouse looked even more dilapidated in person than it had in the photos. A 2-story white clapboard structure with peeling paint, several broken windows, and a porch that sagged dangerously to one side. The surrounding fields were overgrown, with weeds and small trees, and the barn in the distance was missing parts of its roof. It's perfect, Lily declared, unbuckling her seatbelt before Sarah had fully stopped the car. Lily, wait, Sarah called, but her daughter was already running toward the house, propelled by the boundless optimism of childhood. Sarah followed, more cautiously, mentally cataloguing the most urgent repairs. The roof seemed largely intact, which was something. The structural issues appeared to be primarily with the porch and possibly one corner of the house where the foundation had settled. The front door was secured with a combination lockbox. Sarah entered the code from her paperwork, and the box clicked open. The key was old and heavy, fitting the ornate door lock that appeared original to the house. "Ready?" she asked Lily, who nodded eagerly. The door creaked open on rusted hinges, revealing a dust-filled entrance hall. The air inside was stale and musty, with an underlying dampness that suggested water issues. Sarah stepped cautiously onto the wooden floorboards, testing each one before committing her weight. "Hello," Lily called out, her voice echoing through the empty rooms. "We're your new family." Despite her concerns, Sarah smiled at her daughter's immediate claim on the space. They moved slowly through the first floor, a formal parlor with an ancient fireplace, a dining room with built-in cabinets, a kitchen with appliances that had to be at least 40 years old, and a small study with empty bookshelves lining the walls. Throughout the house, Sarah noted the quality of the original craftsmanship. Beneath the layers of dust and neglect, there were hand-carved moldings, solid hardwood floors, and details that spoke of a time when houses were built to last generations. The farmhouse had good bones, as her father would say. The second floor held 4 bedrooms and a bathroom with a clawfoot tub, but no shower. The master bedroom had a small balcony overlooking what must have once been gardens, but were now wild tangles of vegetation. "Can this be my room?" Lily asked, standing in a small bedroom with faded floral wallpaper and a window seat. "If that's the one you want," Sarah agreed, relieved that at least the ceiling appeared solid with no obvious water damage. They returned downstairs, and Sarah checked the basement door off the kitchen. It opened to reveal steep stone steps leading into darkness. "Stay up here," she instructed Lily, using the flashlight on her phone to navigate the steps. The basement was divided into several rooms, a root cellar with empty shelves, a furnace room with an ancient oil furnace, and a laundry area with a concrete sink and hookups for washer and dryer. The foundation walls were stone, at least 2 feet thick, in places and surprisingly dry for a house this age. As Sarah turned to head back upstairs, her light caught something unusual, a section of wall that didn't quite match the rest. The stonework was similar, but not identical, as if a doorway had been sealed up at some point. She made a mental note to examine it more closely later. Back upstairs, she found Lily in the kitchen, attempting to turn on the faucet. "No water yet, sweetheart, and no electricity either. We'd need to stay at the apartment tonight and start working on getting utilities connected tomorrow." Lily's face fell. "But it's our farm now. Can't we camp inside? Please." Sarah considered their options. They had sleeping bags in the car from their last camping trip. The spring night was mild. With no functioning plumbing, it would be challenging, but not impossible for one night. "Okay," she agreed, "but just for tonight. Tomorrow we start figuring out how to make this place actually livable." They returned to the car to retrieve their emergency supplies: sleeping bags, battery-powered lanterns, bottled water, and snacks. Sarah was grateful for her habit of keeping the car stocked for emergencies. As they set up their makeshift camp in the living room, Sarah's mind raced with practical concerns. The property had a well, which would need to be tested and possibly treated before providing safe drinking water. The electrical system would need inspection and likely complete renovation. The plumbing was anyone's guess, and those were just the basics needed for habitation, not even addressing the structural repairs or cosmetic renovations. "What are you thinking about, Mom?" Lily asked, arranging her sleeping bag near Sarah's. "Just making lists in my head," Sarah admitted. "This place needs a lot of work before it's really livable." Lily looked around the dusty room, illuminated by the warm glow of their lanterns. "I think it's perfect already. It just needs us to love it again." Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. Her daughter's perspective was exactly what she needed, a reminder that beneath the overwhelming practical challenges lay an opportunity to build something meaningful. As darkness fell, they ate sandwiches on the front porch, watching fireflies appear in the overgrown fields. Despite the uncertainty of their situation, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. They had a roof over their heads, albeit one that probably leaked in places. They had land, wild and untamed as it currently was. Most importantly, they had possibilities that hadn't existed yesterday. "Look, Mom!" Lily pointed to the eastern edge of the property, where a nearly full moon was rising, casting silver light across the fields. "The moon is welcoming us home." Home. The word resonated in Sarah's mind. This broken-down farmhouse was now their home, for better or worse. Tomorrow would bring the harsh reality of repairs and renovations. But tonight, in the moonlight, she allowed herself to see the potential. After Lily had fallen asleep, wrapped in her sleeping bag and using her backpack as a pillow, Sarah sat on the front steps with a notepad, making lists by lantern light. The enormity of what she had done hit her in waves. She had spent nearly every dollar she had on a property that most people considered worthless. She had brought her 7-year-old daughter to live in a house with no functioning utilities. She had traded the little security they had for a massive project with no guarantee of success. "What have I done?" she whispered to the night. If in answer, an owl called from a nearby tree, the sound echoing across the silent fields. Sarah looked up at the star-filled sky, so much clearer here than in the city, and felt a strange certainty settle over her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever secrets this old farm held, she and Lily were exactly where they were meant to be. The next morning, Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through the dusty windows and the sound of Lily already up and exploring. "Mom, come quick! I found something cool in the kitchen." Sarah hurried to join her daughter, who was pointing excitedly at what appeared to be a normal section of floor near the pantry. "Look, it moves!" Lily demonstrated by pressing on one edge of a floorboard, causing the opposite end to rise slightly. Sarah knelt to examine it more closely. It wasn't damage or deterioration. The board was intentionally installed as a small, hidden compartment. She carefully pried it open to reveal a space about the size of a shoebox beneath the floor. Inside was a brass key, old and tarnished, with an unusual design on its head, what appeared to be a compass rose. "Treasure!" Lily exclaimed. "I knew we'd find treasure in our farm." Sarah turned the key over in her hand, her curator's mind, immediately cataloguing its age and style, Mid-19th century, likely handcrafted. But what did it open? It might be a key to one of the outbuildings, she suggested, though the ornate design seemed excessive for a simple utility key. They spent the morning exploring the property in daylight. Beyond the farmhouse and main barn were several smaller structures, a chicken coop, a smokehouse, a workshop, and what appeared to be a spring house built into a small hillside. None of their doors seemed to match the ornate key. By midday, practical concerns took precedence over mystery. Sarah drove them back to town to arrange for utilities and purchase basic supplies. At the hardware store, she struck up a conversation with the owner, an older man named Frank Holloway, whose family had owned the shop for generations. "The Emerson place, huh?" Frank's bushy eyebrows rose when Sarah mentioned her purchase. "Brave woman. That property's been sitting empty since Eleanor Winters passed. Before that, it was abandoned for nearly a decade after the last Emerson died. I know it needs work," Sarah acknowledged, "but the price was right, and it's a chance for a fresh start for my daughter and me." Frank studied her for a moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. "Tell you what, I've got some outdated but perfectly functional bathroom fixtures in the back from a renovation job that fell through. Previous customer already paid, then changed their mind and went high-end. You can have them at cost if they'd help you get that place habitable." The unexpected kindness brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "That would help tremendously, thank you." "Been in this town my whole life," Frank said, waving off her gratitude. "The Emerson farm was once the heart of this community. Would be good to see it come back to life." He hesitated, then added, "You might want to talk to Mabel Turner at the Historical Society. She and Eleanor Winters had some kind of falling out years ago, but if anyone knows the history of that place, it's Mabel." Sarah made a mental note to visit the Historical Society, both for information about the farm and to introduce herself professionally. Perhaps there might eventually be opportunities there related to her museum background. By evening, they had arranged for electricity to be connected the following day, purchased enough supplies to make one bathroom functional once the water was running, and loaded their car with essentials from their apartment. They returned to the farm as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the overgrown fields. As Sarah unloaded their supplies, she noticed a truck parked at the edge of the property line. A man in his 60s leaned against the hood, watching them. After a moment's hesitation, Sarah approached him, protective instincts on alert. "Can I help you?" she called when she was within speaking distance. The man straightened. He was tall and lean, with the weathered complexion of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. "Name's Joe Harmon," he said. "Own the farm bordering yours to the north. Saw there were people here finally." "Sarah Mitchell," she replied, offering her hand. "And my daughter Lily. We just bought the place yesterday." Joe shook her hand, his grip firm but not challenging. "Figured as much. County's been trying to unload this property for months." His eyes scanned the overgrown fields. "Good soil here, if you're planning to farm it. Emerson's grew some of the best corn and wheat in the county back in their day." "We're just focusing on making the house habitable for now," Sarah admitted. "Farming might come later, if ever." Joe nodded. "Well, water's your first concern. That well's been sitting unused for a year at least. I've got a friend who does well inspection and treatment if you need a recommendation." Sarah thanked him, surprised and relieved by the neighborly offer. As Joe turned to leave, he paused. "One more thing. There's been some strange activity around this property over the years. People coming at night, lights in the fields. Dr. Winters was protective of her privacy, wouldn't talk about her research. But whatever she was looking for, others seem interested in finding it too." He met Sarah's eyes directly. "Just be aware." With that cryptic warning, he climbed into his truck and drove away, leaving Sarah with more questions than answers about their new home. That night, after another makeshift dinner and getting Lily settled to sleep, Sarah's curiosity drew her. Back to the basement. With a better flashlight purchased in town, she examined the section of wall that had caught her attention the previous day. Up close, the difference in stonework was even more apparent. Newer mortar, slightly different sized stones. Someone had sealed up an opening, and judging by the condition of the mortar, it had been done relatively recently, perhaps within the last few decades. Sarah ran her hands along the edges of the modified section, her historian's mind racing with possibilities. Root cellars in historic homes often had multiple rooms for storing different types of produce at varying temperatures and humidity levels. Perhaps this had simply been an obsolete storage area sealed up during a renovation. But as her flashlight beam played across the stones, she noticed something unusual, a small recess in the center of the sealed area, about the size of a keyhole but filled in with mortar. Sarah's hand went to her pocket where she'd been carrying the brass key they'd found under the kitchen floor. Could there be a connection? Using a screwdriver from their supplies, she carefully chipped away at the mortar in the small recess. It came away more easily than she expected, revealing what was indeed a keyhole. Heart-pounding, Sarah took out the brass key. It fit perfectly into the exposed keyhole. She hesitated, suddenly aware of the silence pressing around her in the dark basement. Joe Harmon's warning about strange activity echoed in her mind. What if whatever was hidden behind this wall was the reason for that activity? But her academic curiosity won out. Slowly, she turned the key. A dull click sounded, followed by a scraping noise as the section of wall shifted slightly. Sarah stepped back, watching in amazement as the entire sealed area, about the size of a standard door, moved inward on hidden hinges. Beyond was darkness, untouched by her flashlight beam. A cool draft carried a musty smell, not the dampness of the basement, but something older, earthier. Sarah's flashlight revealed a narrow tunnel extending beyond the opening, its walls lined with fitted stones and its floor paved with brick. The construction was solid and professional, clearly designed for long-term use rather than as a temporary passage. For a moment, she considered closing the door and pretending she hadn't found it. She had Lily to think of. A mysterious tunnel beneath their new home certainly hadn't been in her plans when she'd made the desperate decision to buy the farm. But the historian in her couldn't turn away from such a discovery. This wasn't just some root cellar extension. This was a deliberately hidden passage, sealed and forgotten until now. Taking a deep breath, Sarah stepped through the doorway into the tunnel, keeping one hand on the stone wall beside her. The passage extended about 15 feet before opening into a small chamber, roughly the size of the kitchen above. Unlike the unfinished basement, this room had been carefully constructed and preserved. The walls were fully mortared stone. The floor was laid with brick in a herringbone pattern, and the ceiling was supported by heavy wooden beams that showed no signs of rot or insect damage. But it was the contents of the room that took Sarah's breath away. Along 3 walls ran floor-to-ceiling shelving, filled with document boxes, leather-bound books, rolled maps, and glass specimen jars. A large wooden table dominated the center of the room, its surface covered with papers weighted down by small stones and metal figurines. Sarah moved closer, playing her flashlight over the table's contents. The papers appeared to be maps and diagrams, some hand-drawn, others printed, from older sources. Many had annotations in a cramped, precise handwriting that she assumed belonged to Eleanor Winters. But one document in particular caught her attention, not because of its content, which she couldn't immediately discern in the limited light, but because of what secured it to the table. A small metal weight in the shape of a compass rose, identical to the design on the key that had opened the hidden door. Sarah carefully lifted the metal weight, her fingers tracing the compass rose, design that matched the key. Beneath it lay a yellow document that appeared to be a letter, dated April 17th, 1863. Her historian's training immediately kicked in. She shouldn't be handling these artifacts with bare hands, without proper archival gloves, in less than ideal environmental conditions. But curiosity overpowered professional caution as she tilted the paper toward her flashlight. "My dearest Eleanor," the letter began, "what we have discovered beneath the farm must remain hidden until the war's end. The evidence contradicts every official account of our nation's founding principles, and in these fragile times, such truth could shatter rather than heal." Sarah's heart raced. The letter was addressed to an Eleanor, but not Dr. Winters, who had died just last year. This was dated 1863, during the height of the Civil War. She scanned further, catching phrases about hidden passages, original documents, and the true intent of our founders regarding the matter of enslavement. A noise from above startled her, a floorboard creaking. Lily must have woken up. Reluctantly, Sarah placed the letter back on the table, securing it with the compass rose weight. She needed to return to her daughter, but her mind was already spinning with the implications of what she'd found. This hidden room was no ordinary root cellar or storage space. It appeared to be a private archive, meticulously maintained and deliberately concealed, and based on the letter's date and content, it likely contained historical materials that predated Eleanor Winters' ownership by more than a century. As Sarah carefully backed out of the chamber, she noticed something she'd missed on entering. A small brass plate mounted beside the door, engraved with words that sent a chill down her spine. The Emerson Underground Archive. Truth above consequence. She secured the hidden door behind her, the key turning with a solid click that seemed to echo in the empty basement. Her discovery would have to wait until morning, when Lily was awake and she could explore properly. Upstairs, she found Lily, standing in the kitchen, sleepily rubbing her eyes. "Mom, where were you?" "Just checking the basement," Sarah said, not yet ready to share her discovery. "Why are you up, sweetheart?" "I heard something outside," Lily said, pointing toward the window, "like a car, but then it stopped." Sarah moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. At first, she saw nothing but the moonlit fields and the shadowy outline of the barn. Then a faint movement caught her eye, a beam of light sweeping across the far edge of the property near the tree line. Someone was out there, walking their land in the middle of the night. The memory of Joe Harmon's warning flooded back. Strange activity, people coming at night. Sarah's protective instincts surged as she quickly turned off their lantern, plunging the kitchen into darkness. "Let's go back to our sleeping bags," she whispered to Lily. "It's probably just an animal with reflective eyes." But as they settled back into the living room, Sarah positioned herself where she could watch the window. The distant light moved methodically along the tree line before disappearing into the woods. Only then did she allow herself to relax slightly. Whatever she had discovered in that hidden room, others were looking for it too. The question was, who? And how did they know it existed when she'd only found it by chance? Morning brought practical concerns that temporarily overshadowed the mystery. The electrical company arrived to reconnect power to the house, revealing a system that was outdated but surprisingly well-maintained. Dr. Winters had the main panel upgraded about 10 years ago, the technician told Sarah. Wiring in the newer sections is up to code, but you'll want to be careful with the original parts of the house until you can get those rewired. By midday, they had electricity in most rooms and a preliminary assessment of the plumbing system. The news there was less positive. The pipes in the bathroom were corroded and would need replacement before water could be safely connected. 2 days' work minimum, the plumber estimated, and that's just to get one bathroom functioning. The estimate he provided made Sarah's heart sink. It would take nearly all the money she had set aside from her final paycheck, which was meant to cover their living expenses until she found more stable work. As the plumber left, Sarah noticed a car slowing as it passed the farm's entrance, an expensive black sedan that seemed out of place on the rural road. It continued after a moment, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Later that afternoon, as Lily explored the overgrown gardens behind the house, Sarah returned to the basement and the hidden door. This time, she brought her phone to take photographs and a notebook to document what she found. The chamber felt different in the glow of the battery-powered lantern she'd brought down. What had seemed mysterious and slightly intimidating in the narrow beam of her flashlight now revealed itself as a meticulously organized private research facility. The shelves contained not just books and papers, but carefully labeled document boxes, many bearing dates ranging from the late 1700s through the 1970s. The specimens in glass jars turned out to be soil and plant samples, each with a small tag indicating where and when they were collected. Sarah recognized the organizational system as similar to those used in university archives. This was the work of a professional researcher, not a hobbyist or conspiracy theorist. Eleanor Winters, whatever her eccentricities, had been methodical. In her approach, the table in the center of the room held what appeared to be Dr. Winters' most recent work before her death. Sarah carefully examined the maps spread across its surface, recognizing the local geography with annotations marking specific sites across the county. Many were cross-referenced to document boxes on the shelves, but it was the letter from 1863 that drew Sarah back. Reading it fully now, she began to understand its significance. My dearest Eleanor, what we have discovered beneath the farm must remain hidden until the war's end. The evidence contradicts every official account of our nation's founding principles, and in these fragile times, such truth could shatter rather than heal. The original documents prove beyond doubt that Jefferson's initial draft explicitly condemned slavery as a moral abomination, with language far stronger than what appears in our Declaration. The removal of these passages was not, as history records, merely a political compromise, but a deliberate concealment orchestrated by those whose economic interests depended on the continuation of the institution. More troubling still are the personal letters revealing that Washington, despite his public positions, privately supported immediate emancipation as early as 1771, only to be silenced by threats against his family from certain Virginia interests, whose names are prominently carved on our national monuments today. The tunnel network we have expanded now connects to the old Davis property. From there, our passengers can reach the river with minimal exposure. 23 souls have passed safely through our care this month alone. The false history in the basement continues to serve us well. If discovered, the military maps appear to be nothing more than a farmer's survey of water sources. Keep the compass aligned to true north, not magnetic. The future generations who find this truth must understand that our moral compass was similarly misdirected by those who wrote our official history. With enduring hope, Thomas Emerson, Sarah sat back, her mind racing. If authentic, this letter suggested that the Emerson farm had been part of the Underground Railroad, helping enslaved people escape to freedom during the Civil War. But it hinted at something potentially more explosive. Documentary evidence that contradicted established historical narratives about the Founding Fathers' positions on slavery. As a historian, Sarah understood the significance of such claims. Academic careers had been built on far less, but she also recognized the need for verification. Extraordinary claims required extraordinary evidence. The reference to Eleanor in the 1863 letter was particularly puzzling. Eleanor Winters had only owned the property for the past 15 years. This letter clearly predated her by more than a century. Was it possible the name Eleanor had passed through generations of women connected to this farm? Or had Dr. Winters been drawn to this property precisely because she shared a name with a historical figure connected to it? Sarah began photographing the letter and other documents, careful not to disturb their arrangement. As she worked, she noticed a leather-bound journal that appeared more recent than the Civil War materials. Opening it, she recognized Dr. Winters' handwriting from the annotations on the maps. The journal detailed Eleanor Winters' research over the past 15 years, beginning with her purchase of the farm, following an academic dispute that had effectively ended her university career. The department rejected my findings as insufficiently supported and potentially disruptive to established historical consensus, she had written, but I've traced the documentary evidence through 3 separate archival sources. The traditional narrative of our founders as reluctant slaveholders, progressively moving toward enlightenment, is a deliberate construction designed to sanitize our national origin story. The journal continued, documenting her discovery of the hidden room shortly after purchasing the property, found the chamber today behind the false wall in the basement. The key was exactly where Thomas Emerson described in his letter to the County Historical Society, beneath the 7th floorboard from the pantry door. The collection is extraordinary, far more extensive than I could have hoped. The Emerson family maintained this archive for generations, each adding to its contents until the line ended in the 1970s. I may be the first person outside the family to see these materials in over 150 years. Sarah's professional excitement built as she read further. If legitimate, this archive could represent one of the most significant historical discoveries in recent memory, primary source documents that might fundamentally alter our understanding of early American history and the Founding Fathers' true positions on slavery. But the journal's later entries took a darker turn. March 12, 2019. Someone has been watching the farm. Tire tracks near the North Field entrance, not from agricultural vehicles. When I mentioned it to Sheriff Collins, he dismissed my concerns, suggested it was probably just kids or hunters trespassing. But I don't believe it. Academic rivals, government interests, those with reason to maintain the sanitized version of history. The final entry, dated just 3 weeks before Eleanor Winters' reported death, sent a chill through Sarah. April 30th, 2022. They've made contact directly now. A man identifying himself as representing the Fitzwater Foundation offered to purchase my research and the property for a substantial sum. When I declined, his demeanor changed. Some truths are better left undisturbed, Dr. Winters. For the stability of our national identity, are not a threat spoken explicitly, but his meaning was clear. I've sealed the chamber entrance with fresh mortar. The key is back beneath the floorboard. If anything happens to me, may this archive find its way to someone with both the courage and the platform to share its contents with the world. Sarah closed the journal, her hands trembling slightly. Eleanor Winters' death had been reported as natural causes, a heart attack at age 72. But now Sarah couldn't help wondering if there had been more to the story. A sound from upstairs broke her concentration, Lily's voice calling for her. "Mom, there's a car coming up the driveway." Sarah quickly returned the journal to its place, exited the hidden chamber, and locked it behind her. She raced upstairs to find Lily peering out the front window. A black sedan, the same one Sarah had noticed earlier, had parked in front of the house. A man in his 50s, wearing an expensive suit that seemed out of place in rural Mapleton County, was walking toward the porch. "Stay inside," Sarah told Lily, stepping onto the porch and closing the door behind her. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Mitchell? I'm Richard Fitzwater of the Fitzwater Historical Foundation. I understand you've recently acquired this property." The name sent a jolt of recognition through Sarah, the same foundation mentioned in Eleanor Winters' final journal entry. "That's right," she answered cautiously. "Just yesterday." "Wonderful. Our foundation specializes in preserving historical properties with significance to American heritage. He handed her a business card, embossed with a logo featuring a compass, rose, identical to the design on the key. We'd be interested in purchasing this property for substantially more than you paid at auction, say 20 times your investment? The offer was unexpected and suspiciously generous, $24,000 for a property she'd paid $200 for just yesterday. "I'm not interested in selling," Sarah said firmly. "We've just begun renovations." Fitzwater's smile tightened slightly. "I understand, but I should mention that our foundation has resources that could be valuable to someone in your position." His gaze flickered to Lily, visible through the window. "A single mother, I believe. Former museum curator. The job market in your field is quite competitive these days." The fact that he knew these details about her was deeply unsettling. Sarah straightened her posture, drawing on every ounce of confidence she could muster. "As I said, the farm is not for sale. Now, if you'll excuse me, we have work to do." Fitzwater nodded, seemingly unperturbed by her refusal. "Of course. Should you change your mind, my contact information is on the card." He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing, Miss Mitchell. If you happen to find anything unusual during your renovations, papers, historical artifacts, particularly relating to the Civil War period, our foundation offers authentication services. Some old documents can be quite valuable to the right institutions." With that, he returned to his car and drove away, leaving Sarah with the distinct impression that his visit had been far more than a routine real estate inquiry. Inside, Lily was full of questions. Who was that man? Why did he want to buy our farm? Sarah chose her words carefully. "He's from a historical foundation that buys old properties. But don't worry, we're not selling." "Good," Lily said firmly, "because I've already named the chickens we're going to get." Sarah smiled at her daughter's unwavering optimism, but her mind was racing. The connection between Fitzwater, the compass rose symbol, and Eleanor Winter's final warning was too significant to ignore. Whatever was hidden in that underground archive, people with considerable resources were actively seeking it. That evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, Sarah called her former colleague from the Westbrook Museum, Dr. Michael Chen. "Sarah, great to hear from you. How are things?" Michael's familiar voice brought a wave of nostalgia for her former life. "Actually, I've made some changes," Sarah explained. "I bought a farm about 40 minutes outside Westbrook." "A farm?" Michael sounded genuinely surprised. "That's quite a career shift." "It was an impulse decision," Sarah admitted. "But Michael, I found something here that might be of professional interest. Have you ever heard of a historian named Eleanor Winters?" The pause before Michael's response was telling. "Eleanor Winters. Yes, I'm familiar with her work. Brilliant researcher, but her later theories were considered somewhat controversial. She made claims about Founding Fathers' views on slavery that contradicted established scholarship." "Why do you ask?" "I bought her farm," Sarah said simply. "The Emerson place in Mapleton County." Another pause. Longer this time. "Sarah, be careful with anything you find there." Winters was discredited not because her arguments lacked merit, but because she couldn't produce the documentary evidence she claimed to have discovered. Some colleagues believed she was manufacturing historical fiction to support her theories. "And what did you believe?" Michael sighed. "I believed she was onto something significant, but got ahead of herself academically. Instead of working within the system, presenting her findings for peer review, she became increasingly secretive and paranoid, started talking about conspiracies to suppress her research." "What if she had reason to be paranoid?" Sarah asked. "What if the evidence existed but she was protecting it?" "Sarah," Michael's voice took on a cautionary tone, "whatever you think you've found, approach it with professional skepticism. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, Sarah finished. I know. But Michael, I need to ask you something else. Have you heard of the Fitzwater Historical Foundation? The silence that followed was answer enough. They're not what they present themselves to be, Michael finally said, his voice lowered. On paper, they're a private foundation, dedicated to historical preservation. In practice, they're more like historical gatekeepers. They've been known to acquire properties or collections with potentially controversial historical materials, and those materials mysteriously never see the light of day. Funded by whom? Sarah pressed. Family money originally, Old Virginia. Wealth. But their board now includes representatives from some very powerful modern interests, political dynasties, corporations with historical ties to industries that benefited from slavery. People with reasons to prefer certain versions of American history remain undisturbed. He paused. Why are you asking about them specifically? Their representative visited today, barely 24 hours after I purchased the property, offered to buy it for 20 times what I paid. Sarah. Michael's voice was deadly serious now. Whatever you've found, be careful who you tell. And consider accepting their offer. Some battles aren't worth fighting, especially when you have Lily to think about. After hanging up, Sarah stood at the kitchen window, staring out at the moonlit fields of the farm, her farm. Michael's warning echoed in her mind, colliding with the final entries in Eleanor Winter's journal. The practical side of her argued that $24,000 would solve their immediate financial problems. They could find a small house closer to town, with functioning plumbing and without mysterious visitors in the night. She could continue her job search without the pressing burden of renovating a dilapidated farmhouse. But the historian in her knew that whatever lay in that hidden archive was potentially priceless, not in monetary terms, but in its historical significance. If Eleanor Winters had truly discovered primary documents that could reshape our understanding of the Founding Fathers' positions on slavery, that knowledge belonged to the public, to history itself, not locked away in some private collection. And there was something else, something more personal that Sarah couldn't quite articulate. This farm, for all its problems and mysteries, already felt like home in a way their apartment never had. The thought of Lily growing up here, connecting with the land, learning the history beneath her feet, it stirred something fundamental in Sarah's heart. The decision crystallized in her mind. They would stay, they would renovate, and she would continue investigating the archive, carefully and methodically, documenting everything she found. If the evidence proved authentic, she would find a way to share it safely with the world. And if danger came, well, she would deal with that when it arrived. For now, she had a farm to restore and a roof to fix before the next rainfall. The secrets buried beneath the Emerson farm had waited more than 150 years to be revealed. They could wait a little longer while she secured a future for herself and Lily. The following morning, Sarah drove into town with a new sense of purpose. At the bank, she opened a safe deposit box and secured copies of the most significant photographs she'd taken of the archive materials. Next, she visited the County Historical Society, a small operation housed in what had once been the town's library. The woman at the desk looked up as Sarah entered. Late 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and wire-rimmed glasses, she had the careful posture of someone who had spent a lifetime handling fragile materials. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice carrying the slight local accent Sarah was beginning to recognize. "I hope so. I'm Sarah Mitchell. I just purchased the Emerson farm. Are you Mabel Turner by any chance?" The woman's expression shifted subtly, surprise followed by something more guarded. "I am. What can I do for you, Miss Mitchell?" I'm a historian by training, Sarah explained, former curator at the Westbrook Municipal Museum. I'm interested in learning more about the history of my new property, particularly its connection to the Underground Railroad during the Civil War. Mabel studied her for a long moment before responding. The Emerson family had deep roots in this county, going back to the 1790s. Thomas Emerson, who owned the farm during the Civil War period, was known to have abolitionist sympathies, though the extent of his involvement with the Underground Railroad remains speculative. Her carefully measured response told Sarah that Mabel knew more than she was sharing. "And what about Eleanor Winters? I understand you knew her." Mabel's lips pressed into a thin line. Dr. Winters had some unconventional theories about local history. Did those theories involve documentary evidence contradicting established narratives about the Founding Fathers' positions on slavery? Sarah asked directly. The older woman removed her glasses, polishing them slowly with a cloth from her desk drawer, a deliberate stalling tactic. "Ms. Mitchell, you seem like an intelligent woman. Let me offer some advice. Historical research is valuable, but it can also lead down unproductive paths. Dr. Winters became obsessed with validating theories that ultimately damaged her professional reputation." "Did you believe her theories?" Sarah pressed. Mabel replaced her glasses and met Sarah's gaze directly. "What I believed is less important than what I observed. Eleanor Winters arrived in this town as a respected historian and left this world as a discredited recluse. Whatever path you're considering following, I suggest caution." She paused, then added more softly, "Especially with a young daughter to consider." The mention of Lily sent a chill through Sarah. How did Mabel know about her daughter already? Small-town gossip could account for it, but following on the heels of Fitzwater's similarly specific knowledge, it felt more like surveillance than community awareness. "Thank you for the advice," Sarah said, keeping her tone neutral. "I'm just trying to understand the property I've purchased. If you think of any resources that might help, I'd appreciate it." As Sarah turned to leave, Mabel called after her. "Ms. Mitchell, the Historical Society closes at 4 p.m. on Wednesdays and Fridays. I typically remain to catalogue materials until around 6 p.m. The back door remains unlocked during that time." The message was clear. Mabel was offering a private conversation, away from potential observers or recording devices. "Thank you," Sarah said. "That's good to know." That Friday afternoon, Sarah waited until the Historical Society's closing time before slipping through the back door, as Mabel had suggested. The small building was silent, except for the hum of an aging HVAC system and the occasional creak of the old wooden floors. Mabel sat at a desk in the archives room, surrounded by acid-free document boxes and preservation supplies. She looked up as Sarah entered, her expression unreadable behind her wire-rimmed glasses. "Close the door," she said quietly. Sarah complied, then took the seat Mabel indicated across from her desk. "Before we begin," Mabel said, "I need to know exactly what you found at the Emerson place." Sarah hesitated, weighing her instincts against her need for information. "A hidden room in the basement," she finally admitted, "behind a false wall. Inside is what appears to be a private archive, spanning from the Revolutionary period through the 1970s. Mabel nodded slowly, as if confirming something she already suspected. "And have you found the tunnel system yet?" "Tunnel system?" "The hidden room contains maps showing what looked like underground passages, but I haven't located any physical tunnels beyond the room itself." "Because you haven't looked in the right place," Mabel said, opening a drawer in her desk. She withdrew. "A leather portfolio, aged but well preserved. Eleanor gave me this before things escalated. She said if anything happened to her, I should keep it safe until someone worthy came to the farm." She pushed the portfolio across the desk. Inside was a hand-drawn map of the Emerson property, far more detailed than the county survey. It showed not just the farmhouse and outbuildings, but a complex network of underground passages connecting multiple points across the property and extending beyond its boundaries. The Emerson farm wasn't just a station on the Underground Railroad, Mabel explained. It was a hub, one of the most sophisticated operations in the northern route. Thomas Emerson wasn't just a sympathizer, he was a master architect of escape. Routes. Sarah studied the map, noting how several tunnels converged at what appeared to be the hidden room she'd discovered. These looked professionally constructed. How could they have built something this extensive without detection? The Emersons owned the largest quarry in the county before the Civil War. They had both the expertise and the materials. Mabel leaned forward. But the tunnels were secondary to what Thomas Emerson was really protecting: documentary evidence that would have been explosive in his time and remains controversial in ours. The letters suggesting the Founding Fathers had stronger anti-slavery positions than history records, Sarah said. Mabel's eyebrows raised slightly. So you've seen them. Then you understand why certain interests would prefer those documents remain buried, literally and figuratively. They contradict the carefully constructed narrative that our nation's founders were men of their time who couldn't have been expected to oppose slavery more forcefully. But why would anyone care about protecting that narrative now? Sarah asked, wouldn't revealing the truth be seen as positive, showing that key founders actually held more progressive views privately than they expressed publicly? Historical narratives aren't just about the past, Ms. Mitchell. They're about legitimizing the present. If the Founding Fathers privately condemned slavery in the strongest possible terms while publicly enabling it due to economic and political pressure, what does that say about our current systems? What other moral compromises are we making today that future generations will judge us for? Sarah considered this. As a historian, she understood how powerful interests shaped which versions of history became official. The Founding Fathers were not just historical figures, but symbols used to legitimize modern political positions. What happened to Eleanor Winters? She asked directly. Mabel removed her glasses, suddenly looking older and very tired. Officially, she died of a heart attack. Unofficially, in the weeks before her death, she believed she was being followed. Her house was broken into, though supposedly nothing was taken. She began sending copies of key documents to trusted colleagues. I was one of them. And the Fitzwater Foundation? They approached her multiple times, offering increasingly large sums for the property. When she refused, there were veiled threats, suggestions that her continued research was destabilizing and unpatriotic. Mabel shook her head. I can't prove they were involved in her death, but the timing was convenient. Sarah thought of Lily, waiting at the farm with their elderly neighbor who had offered to watch her for a few hours. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders. I should sell the farm, she said quietly. Take the money and walk away. My daughter has to come first. Perhaps, Mabel agreed. No one would blame you, but before you decide. She reached into her desk again and withdrew a sealed envelope. Eleanor left this for whoever found the archive. She believed that person would come, sooner or later. Someone who would understand the significance of what she'd discovered. Sarah accepted the envelope, her name written across the front in unfamiliar handwriting. My name? How? Not your name specifically, Mabel explained. The envelope originally said, to the finder. Eleanor changed it the last time I saw her, about a week before she died. She said she'd had a dream about a young woman named Sarah who would continue her work. I thought it was the stress and isolation affecting her mind. She smiled faintly. Until you walked in here today, introducing yourself as Sarah. A chill ran through Sarah that had nothing to do with the building's aggressive air conditioning. Coincidence, surely. Or perhaps Eleanor had known the farm would eventually be sold at auction and might attract someone with historical interests. The name Sarah was common enough. "One more thing," Mabel said, her voice dropping lower. "The hidden chamber you found isn't the only one. According to Eleanor's research, Thomas Emerson created a secondary archive, a backup containing the most sensitive documents. If the main archive was discovered by the wrong people, the most damaging evidence would still be preserved elsewhere. Any idea where this secondary archive might be?" Eleanor believed it was concealed somewhere on the property, but in 15 years of searching, she never found it. Mabel glanced at the wall clock. "You should go now. I've stayed later than usual already, which might attract attention." As Sarah stood to leave, Mabel caught her arm. "Whatever you decide, be careful. Knowledge may be power, but it can also make you a target." The drive back to the farm gave Sarah time to think. The rational part of her mind argued for accepting Fitzwater's offer and walking away. $24,000 would give her and Lily a fresh start somewhere safe, without mysterious tunnels and historically significant secrets that powerful people wanted to keep buried. But another part of her, the part that had dedicated her professional life to preserving and sharing historical truth, rebelled at the idea of allowing these documents to be suppressed. If authentic, they represented a significant revision to our understanding of early American history and the complex moral positions of the Founding Fathers. As she turned onto the gravel driveway of the farm, Sarah was struck by how differently she saw the property now. What had appeared to be just a run-down old farmhouse 2 days ago now revealed itself as a palimpsest of American history. Layers upon layers of stories, secrets, and struggles literally built into its foundations. Mrs. Jenkins, their elderly neighbor from down the road, waved from the porch where she sat with Lily, who was enthusiastically showing her a collection of interesting rocks and wildflowers. "We've had a wonderful afternoon," Mrs. Jenkins said as Sarah approached. "This young lady has quite an eye for natural treasures." "Thank you for watching her," Sarah said. "I hope she wasn't too much trouble." "Not at all. Children bring life to old places." Mrs. Jenkins gathered her belongings. "Oh, and there was a gentleman who drove by earlier. Slowed down, but didn't stop. Black car, very clean. Not local, from his plates." Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach. Fitzwater, or one of his associates most likely. Did he say anything? No, just looked. Made me uncomfortable enough that I took Lily inside for a while. The older woman patted Sarah's arm. "Be careful, dear. Country living is wonderful, but it pays to keep your doors locked these days." After Mrs. Jenkins left, Lily proudly showed Sarah the garden area she had started clearing with her new friend's help. "Mrs. Jenkins says this was probably the kitchen garden a long time ago. We found old plants trying to grow back, herbs and stuff that people used to cook with." Sarah examined the small plot Lily had weeded, noticing the deliberate organization of the plants struggling to reassert themselves after years of neglect. Rosemary, thyme, what appeared to be sage, perennial herbs that had survived without human care. "That's incredible, Lily. You've uncovered a piece of history." Mrs. Jenkins says gardens are like that. They remember what people plant in them, even when people forget. Lily looked up at Sarah, her expression serious beyond her years. "Mom, are we really going to stay here and make the farm live again?" The question struck at the heart of Sarah's dilemma. "I don't know yet. Sweetheart, there are some complications with the house that I'm trying to figure out." "But you like it here, right? I can tell." Lily turned back to her garden. "The farm wants us to stay. It's been waiting for someone to love it again." Sarah smiled at her daughter's personification of the property, but there was something in Lily's certainty that gave her pause. Children often perceive things adults missed, their perspectives unclouded by practicality and fear. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Sarah opened the envelope Mabel had given her. Inside was a letter written in Eleanor Winter's precise handwriting, "To Sarah, if that is indeed your name. If you're reading this, then you found the archive, and Mabel has deemed you worthy of continuing what I started. I don't know who you are or when you'll come, but I've seen you in dreams, a young woman with a child, searching for both sanctuary and purpose." The Emerson Archive contains truths that powerful interests have worked to suppress for generations. The evidence contradicts the controlled narrative of our nation's founding, not to diminish the founders' accomplishments, but to reveal their true moral struggles with the institution of slavery. These were not men comfortably accepting the practices of their time, but individuals caught between their moral convictions and the economic realities they felt powerless to change immediately. Thomas Jefferson's original draft of the Declaration contained a passionate condemnation of slavery that was removed not at his insistence, but despite his objections. Washington's private correspondence reveals a man deeply troubled by slavery, actively developing plans for gradual emancipation of all enslaved people that he didn't live to implement. These truths matter not just historically, but morally. They show us that the struggle between economic expediency and moral principle has always defined our national character. But the Emerson Archive is incomplete. Thomas Emerson created a secondary repository containing the most explosive documents, what he called the Founder's Confession. This includes signed statements from key founders acknowledging slavery as America's original sin and expressing their belief that future generations would require a moral reckoning with this contradiction at the heart of our founding principles. I've searched for 15 years and never found this secondary archive. But in my research, I've uncovered clues suggesting it lies somewhere beneath the property, accessible via a tunnel entrance that only reveals itself when properly understood. The compass rose is key, not just as a symbol, but as a literal direction finder. True north, not magnetic, as Thomas wrote to his Eleanor in 1863. The discrepancy between true and magnetic north changes over time and by location. What aligned in the 1860s will not align today without adjustment. My time is running short. I can feel the noose tightening around my research. If anything happens to me, know that it is no coincidence. The Fitzwater Foundation is not what it appears to be. Trust Mabel, trust yourself, and remember that history belongs to those brave enough to face it honestly. With hope for truth, Eleanor Winters. Sarah read the letter twice, her historian's mind cataloguing the claims while her maternal instincts assessed the dangers. Eleanor's reference to her dreams was unsettling. The specificity of seeing a young woman with a child couldn't be dismissed entirely as coincidence. The mention of the compass rose triggered Sarah's memory. The key that had opened the hidden chamber bore that symbol, as did the metal weight on the table in the archive and the logo on Fitzwater's business card. She unfolded Mabel's map again, studying the tunnel system. Several passages extended beyond the boundaries of the Emerson property, presumably connecting to other underground railroad stations. But one tunnel was marked differently, a dotted line rather than solid, leading to a small chamber marked only with a compass rose symbol. Could this be the secondary archive Eleanor had never found? And what did Thomas Emerson mean by a tunnel entrance that only reveals itself when properly understood? Sarah's thoughts were interrupted by a sound outside. Car tires on gravel, then silence. Moving carefully to avoid creaking floorboards, she peered out the window. In the moonlight, she could make out a vehicle parked at the edge of the property, its lights off. As she watched, two figures emerged and began moving toward the barn. Panic flared briefly before giving way to resolute determination. Whatever they were looking for, she couldn't allow them to find it first. More importantly, she needed to protect Lily. She quickly gathered essentials into a backpack. Flashlight, water bottles, the compass rose key, Mabel's map, and Eleanor's letter. Then she gently woke Lily. "Sweetheart, I need you to be very brave and very quiet," she whispered. "Some people are outside who shouldn't be here. We're going to play a special hiding game." Lily blinked sleepily, but didn't question the urgency in her mother's voice. "Like hide and seek." "Exactly like that, but we have to be extra quiet and follow all my instructions, okay?" Sarah led Lily to the basement, her phone's flashlight illuminating their way. At the hidden door, she inserted the key with the compass rose and opened the passage to the archive chamber. "Wow!" Lily whispered, eyes wide as she took in the shelves of documents and artifacts. "Is this a secret library?" "Something like that," Sarah said, ushering her inside. "We need to stay here until the people outside leave." "Who are they?" Sarah considered how to answer truthfully without frightening her daughter. "People who are interested in the history of our farm, but they didn't ask permission to come looking, so we need to stay out of their way." They settled in the chamber, Sarah positioning herself where she could watch the entrance while keeping Lily behind her. Above, she could hear faint footsteps as the intruders entered the house. "Mom," Lily whispered, tugging at Sarah's sleeve. "Look at this." Sarah turned to find Lily pointing at the wooden table where Eleanor's research had been spread out. The metal compass rose, paperweight, was glowing faintly in the beam of her flashlight. No, not glowing, reflecting. Something about the angle of the light had caught it differently. Curious, Sarah directed her flashlight more deliberately at the metal ornament. The compass rose design cast a shadow on the table's surface, aligning with faint markings scratched into the wood that were otherwise invisible. "It's a map," Lily said with the simple certainty of a child. "Like in treasure hunt books." Sarah adjusted the position of the compass rose, remembering Thomas Emerson's words from his letter. True north, not magnetic. The compass design included both markings, a primary directional arrow labeled N and a secondary one offset by several degrees. When she aligned the primary arrow with true north, checking it against the compass app on her phone, the Jiaosu shadow pattern fell across the table in a new configuration, highlighting a sequence of scratches that formed unmistakable words. The spring house. Beneath the stone marked with the rose, count 12 stones east. Sarah's heart raced with excitement. The spring house, one of the outbuildings she had noticed during their initial exploration of the property. It made perfect sense as a location for a secondary archive. Spring houses were built over natural water sources, often into hillsides, with stable year-round temperatures that would help preserve documents. And their legitimate purpose would explain constant activity around the building without raising suspicion. Above them, the footsteps grew louder, more purposeful. The intruders were methodically searching the house, and it was only a matter of time before they found the entrance to the hidden chamber. "Lily," Sarah whispered, "remember how we explored the basement yesterday? Did you notice any other doors or passages besides this one?" Lily thought for a moment, then nodded. "Behind the big shelf with the garden tools. There's a little door, but it was stuck when I tried to open it." Sarah hadn't noticed it during her own exploration, but children often saw things adults missed, their height giving them different sightlines. "Can you show me?" They exited the archive chamber, Sarah carefully locking it behind them. In the main basement, Lily led her to a tall storage shelf lined with dusty garden implements. Sarah helped move it aside, revealing a small wooden door built into the stone foundation, almost like a coal chute, but horizontal rather than vertical. "It's stuck," Lily demonstrated, pushing against it. Sarah examined the door more carefully and found a small keyhole nearly invisible in the aged wood. On impulse, she tried the compass rose key. It fit perfectly, turning with a soft click. The door swung inward, revealing a narrow passage barely large enough for an adult to crawl through. "It's like a secret tunnel," Lily whispered, eyes wide with excitement. "Like in Narnia." The literary reference gave Sarah an idea. "Exactly like Narnia, and we're going on an adventure through it, just like Lucy and Edmund. But we have to be very quiet, okay?" Lily nodded solemnly, clearly delighted to be participating in a real-life version of her favorite stories. Sarah went first, crawling into the tight passage with her backpack pushed ahead of her. The tunnel was earthen with wooden supports, clearly hand-dug and much older than the archive chamber. It sloped gently downward, moving away from the house. Behind her, Lily followed with remarkable composure for a 7-year-old, treating the potentially frightening situation as an adventure rather than a danger. The passage extended about 50 feet before opening into a slightly wider tunnel where they could stand hunched over. This section was more professionally constructed, with brick floors similar to those in the archive chamber. Consulting Mabel's map by flashlight, Sarah oriented herself. If she was reading it correctly, this tunnel connected directly to the spring house at the edge of the property, bypassing the main network of passages that Eleanor had discovered. "Mom, do you hear water?" Lily asked. Sarah paused, listening. A faint trickling sound came from up ahead, growing louder as they continued forward. After another 100 feet, the tunnel ended at a brick wall with a small iron door set into it. Water seeped around the edges of the door, suggesting it opened directly into the spring itself. The compass rose key unlocked this door as well, though it took considerable effort to push it open against what seemed to be accumulated silt on the other side. When it finally gave way, they found themselves in a small stone chamber built around a natural spring that bubbled up from the ground. Above them, stone steps led up to what Sarah assumed was the spring house proper, but their objective lay elsewhere. She scanned the walls of the chamber, looking for a stone marked with the compass rose. "There!" Lily pointed to a section of wall partially submerged in the shallow pool formed by the spring. One stone near the waterline had a faint carving that matched the design on their key. According to the message from the archive, count 12 stones east. Sarah oriented herself and began counting, her flashlight beam moving across the stone wall. The 12th stone appeared unremarkable, but when she pressed against it experimentally, it moved slightly. With Lily's help, she pushed harder, and the stone slid inward, revealing a small cavity about the size of a bread box. Inside was a metal container, sealed and waterproofed, clearly designed for long-term preservation. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she removed it from its hiding place. This could be the founder's confession that Eleanor had spent years searching for. Documentary evidence powerful enough that people were willing to threaten, perhaps even kill, to keep it suppressed. "Is it treasure?" Lily asked, peering at the container. Sarah smiled at her daughter. "It's knowledge, which can be the most valuable treasure of all." Before she could open the container, voices echoed from the tunnel behind them. The intruders had found the passage. "Quickly," Sarah whispered, tucking the container into her backpack. "Up the steps." They climbed the stone stairs to the spring house above, emerging into a small stone building with a wooden roof. The structure had clearly been maintained. Better than the farmhouse itself, its purpose as protection for the water source too important to neglect. Outside, the night was quiet except for the distant sound of frogs and crickets. No sign of vehicles or flashlights indicated the presence of additional intruders. Sarah led Lily away from the spring house, keeping to the shadows of the tree line as they circled back toward the road. "Where are we going?" Lily whispered. "To Mrs. Jenkins' house," Sarah replied. "We need a safe place to look at what we found." As they moved carefully through the darkness, Sarah felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. In less than a week, her life had transformed from desperate financial straits to something she could never have imagined, the guardian of historical secrets that could potentially rewrite American history. More importantly, she had found a purpose that aligned with both her professional training and her personal values. Whatever happened next, she knew with absolute certainty that purchasing the foreclosed Emerson farm had been no mistake. Some might call it destiny. Sarah preferred to think of it as recognizing an opportunity that others had overlooked. Much like Thomas Emerson had seen beyond a simple farmstead to create a station on the Underground Railroad, or Eleanor Winters had looked past a dilapidated property to discover an historical archive of immense significance. The moon emerged from behind a cloud, illuminating their path forward, away from immediate danger, but toward a future full of both promise and responsibility. Sarah squeezed Lily's hand, drawing strength from her daughter's unwavering trust. Together, they would uncover the truth that had waited more than a century to be revealed. And in doing so, they would write their own chapter in the continuing story of the Emerson farm, a place where history and hope intertwined beneath the seemingly ordinary surface of American life. Mrs. Jenkins met them at her door with surprising composure for a woman in her 70s being awakened after midnight. One look at Sarah's face told her everything she needed to know. "Inside, quickly," she said, ushering them through the door into a warm kitchen that smelled of cinnamon and herbs. "Trouble at the farm?" Sarah nodded, setting her backpack carefully on the kitchen table. "People searching the house. They were looking for something specific." "And you found it first," Mrs. Jenkins observed shrewdly, eyeing the backpack. She turned to Lily, who was fighting to keep her eyes open despite the adventure. "Let's get you settled in the guest room, young lady. I think we have some hot chocolate first, though." While Mrs. Jenkins prepared hot chocolate and settled Lily in a comfortable chair, wrapped in a hand-knit afghan, Sarah made a quick call to the county sheriff's office to report intruders at the property. She deliberately kept the details vague. Trespassers, possibly thieves. No need to mention hidden chambers or historical documents. "They'll send someone to check," she reported, returning to the kitchen, "though I suspect whoever was there is long gone by now." Mrs. Jenkins nodded, setting mugs of hot chocolate before them. "Now then, perhaps you'd better tell me what's really happening." Sarah hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. The elderly woman seemed trustworthy, but the fewer people who knew about the archive, the safer everyone would be. "Eleanor Winters was my cousin," Mrs. Jenkins said quietly, answering the unspoken question. "Second cousin, to be precise. I know about the archive, and I know what happened to her wasn't a simple heart attack." The revelation stunned Sarah. "You're related to Dr. Winters? Why didn't you say anything when we first met?" "Needed to see what kind of person bought the farm," Mrs. Jenkins replied matter-of-factly. "Eleanor always said someone would come who was meant to continue her work. I wasn't sure if that was you until tonight." She nodded toward the backpack. "That's the secondary archive, isn't it? The one she never found." Sarah glanced at Lily, who was focused on her hot chocolate, seemingly untroubled by the adult conversation swirling around her. "Yes," she admitted, "hidden in the spring house, exactly where Thomas Emerson's clues suggested." "Well, let's have a look then." After ensuring Lily was comfortable in the guest room with a book from Mrs. Jenkins' extensive collection, Sarah returned to the kitchen and carefully opened the metal container. Inside, protected by layers of oilcloth and sealed packets of desiccant that had been periodically replaced over generations, was a leather portfolio containing several documents. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened it. Her curator's training screamed that she shouldn't be handling these materials without gloves in a controlled environment, but historical necessity overrode professional caution. The first document was a letter dated July 14, 1776, just 10 days after the adoption of the Declaration of Independence. It was written in Jefferson's distinctive hand and addressed to Thomas Emerson's ancestor, Jeremiah Emerson. My dear Emerson, what we have done today will echo through the ages, but I fear what posterity will make of our compromises. The excision of the slavery clause represents not our moral judgment, but our political necessity. That so righteous a cause as liberty should begin with so grievous a hypocrisy weighs heavily upon my conscience. I entrust to you these original drafts and personal correspondences, not for contemporary publication, which would surely fracture our fragile union before it begins, but for the judgment of future generations who must complete the work we have left unfinished. When America is strong enough to face its contradictions honestly, these documents will provide testimony that we were not blind to our own failures, merely constrained by the circumstances of our creation. Let history know we saw the full scope of liberty, even as we failed to secure it for all. Your faithful servant, Thomas Jefferson. Sarah's breath caught. The letter's provenance would need verification by experts, but if authentic, it represented a stunning admission from Jefferson himself that the founding generation recognized the fundamental contradiction in declaring freedom while maintaining slavery. The portfolio contained other documents of equal significance. Washington's private reflections on the moral bankruptcy of slavery, dated 1786, expressing his determination to find a path to general emancipation. Alexander Hamilton's detailed economic analysis arguing that slavery ultimately weakened rather than strengthened the Southern economy, and most explosively, a joint statement signed by multiple founders in 1790, acknowledging that the Constitution's compromises on slavery were a moral debt that must someday be repaid with interest by this nation. My God, Sarah whispered, carefully returning the documents to their protective coverings. If these are authentic. They are, Mrs. Jenkins said with quiet certainty. Eleanor verified the paper, ink composition, and handwriting against known samples. The Emerson family preserved these documents for generations, updating their preservation methods as new techniques became available. But this changes everything, or at least it challenges the narrative that the founders simply accepted. Slavery as a product of their times. These show they recognized the fundamental hypocrisy in their position but felt politically powerless to resolve it immediately. Which is precisely why certain interests have worked so hard to ensure these documents remain buried, Mrs. Jenkins observed. National mythologies are powerful things, Ms. Mitchell. The story we tell about our founding shapes how we understand ourselves as a nation. If the founders themselves acknowledge their moral failure regarding slavery, it removes the historical immunity often invoked to absolve that generation. Sarah thought about the implications. These documents wouldn't diminish the founders' achievements in creating a democratic republic, but they would complicate the sanitized version of history that portrayed them as unassailable heroes without moral flaws. More importantly, they would show that the struggle between America's ideals and its realities wasn't a modern development, but had existed from the very beginning. What did Eleanor plan to do with these if she found them? Sarah asked. Publish them through multiple academic channels simultaneously with thorough authentication. She believed that widespread public knowledge was the only protection against suppression. Mrs. Jenkins sighed. But she underestimated the resources and determination of those who preferred the documents remain hidden. The Fitzwater Foundation. Mrs. Jenkins nodded. Among others, old money, old power invested in particular versions of American history that support their worldview and interests. Sarah's mind raced with the magnitude of her responsibility. These documents needed to be preserved, authenticated, and shared with the world, but safely, in a way that wouldn't endanger her or Lily. I need to make copies, she decided. Digital backups stored in multiple secure locations, then find the right academic partners to help authenticate and publish them. We can start tonight, Mrs. Jenkins said, surprising Sarah by producing a high-quality scanner from her study. Eleanor and I prepared for this possibility years ago. This scanner is specifically calibrated for archival documents. Working carefully through the night, they created high-resolution digital copies of each document, storing them on encrypted drives that Mrs. Jenkins had somehow anticipated needing. Sarah marveled at the elderly woman's foresight and technical knowledge. Eleanor wasn't the only academic in the family, Mrs. Jenkins explained with a small smile. I taught digital archiving at Columbia before retiring. We always knew the physical documents were vulnerable. Digital redundancy was our insurance policy. By dawn, they had secured the original documents in Mrs. Jenkins' home safe and created multiple digital copies stored on separate devices. Sarah had also written a detailed account of how she'd discovered the archives and what they contained, adding her preliminary assessment of their historical significance. Over breakfast, with Lily happily enjoying Mrs. Jenkins' homemade waffles, they discussed next steps. You can't return to the farm immediately, Mrs. Jenkins advised. Whoever was searching last night will be watching the property. But all our things are there, Sarah protested. Lily's clothes, our supplies. Replaceable, the older woman said firmly. Your safety isn't. I suggest you stay here for a few days while we arrange proper security for both you and the documents. I have a former colleague at the Westbrook Museum, Sarah said, Dr. Michael Chen. He has connections at several major universities and the Smithsonian. If anyone can help authenticate these materials safely, it's him. Call him, Mrs. Jenkins nodded. But be careful what you say on the phone. Cell communications aren't secure. Sarah arranged to meet Michael at a coffee shop in Westbrook that afternoon, asking him to bring his laptop but giving no details about why. Mrs. Jenkins offered to watch Lily, an arrangement that delighted the girl, who had already discovered her host's impressive collection of children's books and a cabinet of art supplies. We'll have a wonderful time, Mrs. Jenkins assured Sarah. My grandchildren visit too rarely these days. It's good to have young energy in the house again. As Sarah prepared to leave, a sheriff's deputy pulled into Mrs. Jenkins' driveway. The young officer approached with a concerned expression. Ms. Mitchell, I'm Deputy Collins. We checked out your property after your call last night. No sign of intruders, but... He hesitated. There was evidence someone had been searching the place pretty thoroughly. Some damage to interior walls, like they were looking for hidden compartments. Sarah thanked him for checking, keeping her explanation simple. She and Lily had been visiting Mrs. Jenkins when they spotted vehicle lights at the farm and called it in. Nothing about hidden chambers or tunnels. You might want to consider better security out there, the deputy suggested. It's pretty isolated. Maybe some cameras, stronger locks. I'll look into that, Sarah promised, though she doubted conventional security measures would deter whoever was after the Emerson archives. The deputy seemed satisfied and left after giving her a card with his direct number. As his cruiser disappeared down the rural road, Mrs. Jenkins joined Sarah on the porch. Sheriff Collins is Fitzwater's second cousin, she said quietly. Not saying Deputy Lucas is involved, but information tends to travel quickly in these parts. The warning was clear. They couldn't trust official channels for protection. Sarah drove to Westbrook with one eye on her rearview mirror, alert for any vehicle that might be following her. The coffee shop she'd chosen was in a busy shopping center with multiple exits, easy to escape if necessary, and public enough to discourage confrontation. Michael was already there when she arrived, his expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. He rose to embrace her, speaking quietly. "You sounded worried on the phone. What's going on, Sarah?" She slid into the booth across from him, keeping her voice low. "I need your help with something sensitive. Professional help, with connections." "You trust completely." Michael's eyebrows rose, but he nodded for her to continue. "I've discovered documents at the farm, primary sources from the founding era that contradict established historical narratives about the founders' positions on slavery." His eyes widened. "Eleanor Winter's research. You actually found evidence?" "Yes, and more than she ever published about. Original letters, signed statements, Jefferson, Washington, Hamilton, others, all acknowledging the moral failure of permitting slavery to continue, despite their personal objections." Michael leaned back, processing the implications. If authentic, that's revolutionary. It wouldn't just add nuance to our understanding of the founding era, it would fundamentally challenge how we interpret the founders' moral legacy. Exactly, and there are people who are very determined to ensure these documents don't become public. She recounted her experiences with the Fitzwater Foundation and the intrusion at the farm, watching Michael's expression grow increasingly grave. "You were right to come to me," he said finally. "I have contacts at Princeton who specialize in authentication of Revolutionary-era documents. People I trust implicitly, professionally, and personally. Can you arrange a meeting? Somewhere secure, away from Westbrook?" Michael nodded, already typing on his laptop. "Give me a few hours to set it up. In the meantime..." He reached into his bag and produced a small device about the size of a key fob. "Keep this with you. It's a panic button that alerts me and 2 trusted friends if you're in trouble. Military-grade encryption. Works anywhere with cell service." Sarah accepted it, surprised. "You came prepared." "Your call wasn't subtle, Sarah. When a historian asks for a secretive meeting after buying the property of a discredited colleague who died under suspicious circumstances..." He shrugged. "Let's just say, I've been expecting something like this since you mentioned the Emerson farm." By mid-afternoon, Michael had arranged a meeting with 2 authenticators from Princeton's Special Collections Department. Dr. Eliza Washington, a specialist in founding-era documents, and Dr. James Park, an expert in forensic document analysis. They would meet the following day at a private research facility in Philadelphia. "It's a 3-hour drive," Michael explained, "but the facility has everything we need for preliminary authentication: specialized imaging equipment, comparative samples, climate-controlled examination rooms." "What about security?" "The facility serves multiple universities and private collectors. Their security protocols are designed for materials worth millions. More importantly, our visit won't be logged in any public system." Sarah thanked him, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. She wasn't alone in this anymore. She had allies with the expertise and resources to help ensure the Emerson documents received proper scientific validation. As she drove back to Mrs. Jenkins's house, Sarah found herself reflecting on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. 1 week ago, she had been facing eviction, desperately searching for any housing option within her limited budget. Now she was at the center of a historical discovery that could potentially reframe America's understanding of its founding principles. The road ahead would be challenging, perhaps even dangerous. The forces that had silenced Eleanor Winters wouldn't simply disappear, but for the first time since losing her museum position, Sarah felt a sense of purpose that transcended mere survival. She was applying her training and expertise to exactly the kind of historical revelation she had always hoped to be part of. More importantly, she was showing Lily by example that courage and integrity mattered, that standing up for truth, even against powerful opposition, was a value worth risking comfort for. When she arrived at Mrs. Jenkins's house, she found Lily in the garden, helping the older woman plant seedlings in a freshly prepared bed. "We're making a butterfly garden," Lily announced excitedly. "Mrs. Jenkins says butterflies are like memories. They carry beauty from one place to another." Sarah smiled, struck by the metaphor's relevance to their situation. They, too, were carrying something beautiful and fragile, historical truth, from the past into the present, hoping it would transform understanding for future generations. Mrs. Jenkins straightened from her gardening, studying Sarah's expression. "Good news. We meet with authenticators tomorrow in Philadelphia. Michael arranged everything." The older woman nodded approvingly. "Good. While you were gone, I made some calls of my own." Eleanor had a network of trusted colleagues across several universities. They've been expecting these documents to surface eventually and have preparations in place for simultaneous publication and preservation. A backup plan, Sarah realized. Smart. Eleanor wasn't just a historian, she was a strategist. Mrs. Jenkins removed her gardening gloves. "Come inside. There's something else you should see." In the study, Mrs. Jenkins unlocked a cabinet and removed a thick, leather-bound volume. Eleanor's complete research notes, including her analysis of the documents you found and additional supporting evidence she gathered over 15 years. Everything needed to contextualize the Emerson archive within established historical scholarship. Sarah accepted the volume reverently. "This is incredible. It provides the academic framework for introducing these new materials." Precisely. Eleanor may not have found the secondary archive, but she laid all the groundwork for its eventual authentication and publication. Mrs. Jenkins smiled sadly. She knew she might not live to see it completed. That's why she created this network of scholars, ready to act when the time came. That evening, as Lily slept peacefully in the guest room, Sarah and Mrs. Jenkins finalized their plans. They would travel to Philadelphia together the next day. Safety in numbers, bringing digital copies of the documents for preliminary authentication. The originals would remain secured in Mrs. Jenkins' safe until their authenticity was confirmed and proper preservation arrangements could be made. "What happens after authentication?" Sarah asked. "Publication will make us targets for whoever tried to suppress these documents before." "That's where Eleanor's network comes in," Mrs. Jenkins explained. "Simultaneous publication through multiple academic channels, with copies of the documents secured in various institutional archives around the world. Once the information is that widely distributed, suppressing it becomes nearly impossible." "And what about the farm?" Sarah couldn't help thinking about the property she'd purchased with such desperate hope just days ago. "I can't just abandon it." The Emerson farm has survived for over 2 centuries, through wars, economic depressions, and attempted suppression of its secrets. It will endure this challenge too. Mrs. Jenkins patted her hand. "But its purpose has always been greater than simply being a place to live. It's a repository of truth, a way station for freedom. First for enslaved people seeking liberty, now for historical truths seeking light." Sarah nodded, understanding the parallels. Just as the Underground Railroad had created a network to move people toward freedom, despite powerful forces working against it, they were now part of a network moving historical truth toward public awareness, despite similar opposition. "One more thing," Mrs. Jenkins said, reaching into her desk drawer. She withdrew a small wooden box and handed it to Sarah. Inside was a pendant featuring the compass rose design, identical to the one on the key. This belonged to Eleanor, and before her, generations of women connected to the Emerson legacy. The compass rose has always represented the same principle: true north versus magnetic north, Moral truth versus expedient direction. Sarah lifted the pendant, feeling its weight and history. Thank you. I'll treasure it. It's not just symbolic, Mrs. Jenkins said with a small smile. The design contains a magnification lens. When aligned properly with sunlight, it can reveal hidden text on certain documents in the archive, another layer of security Thomas Emerson devised. Later that night, unable to sleep, Sarah sat on the porch of Mrs. Jenkins' farmhouse, watching the stars and contemplating the journey ahead. The compass rose pendant hung around her neck, a tangible connection to a lineage of truth-keepers stretching back to the nation's founding. Her purchase of the foreclosed Emerson farm had been an act of desperation, a last resort when all conventional options had failed. Yet it had led her to exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she was trained to do, preserving and sharing historical truth. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, scientific authentication, academic scrutiny, perhaps continued opposition from those who preferred certain truths remain buried. But Sarah felt prepared to face whatever came. She was no longer alone, no longer merely surviving. She was part of something larger than herself, a continuum of individuals who had protected these truths for generations, waiting for the right moment to share them with the world. As the first light of dawn appeared on the horizon, Sarah made a silent promise to the Emersons who had built the farm, to Eleanor Winters, who had dedicated her life to uncovering its secrets, to Mrs. Jenkins, who had preserved the connections, and most importantly, to Lily, who would inherit whatever world they created through their actions. The truth would not remain hidden, not on her watch. Whatever the cost, whatever the challenge, the documents Thomas Emerson had preserved would finally fulfill their purpose, showing America not just what it had been, but what it had always aspired to become. The road ahead might be difficult, but the direction was clear. True north, not magnetic, moral truth, not expedient comfort. The compass rose would guide their way. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.